Yo, Joburg, everybody. Welcome to episode 364. We are talking about G.I. Joe of
64.
the future. Where do we see G.I. Joe in 10 years' time? My name is Steven. I'm joined by Paul.
And I'm Crystal Paul.
Whoa. I'm Rob Ball. Yeah. Together with Crystal
Suppose
Ball.
I'm Soothsayer Steve. And
There we
we're
go.
going to use our divinations to try and determine where we see our beloved toy property in the year 2035. And that's about all I'm going to say in terms of an intro, because this ain't my topic suggestion, not by a wide gulf. Paul, take it away, boy. What gets your wheels turning with this?
Oof. Okay, so where do I start? So it kind of, I was having a conversation with a fellow Bergforce member, and we were just discussing like all the episodes that we had done, and that GI Joburg had done, and some things came to me, and I thought, oh crap, I would love to know how many of our predictions sort of came true now. Like there are some that I can think of, and like O-rings. For example, we had always hoped that there would be modern O-rings, so that wasn't so much a prediction, more like a will it into the universe kind of situation. But I wanted to have an episode where in 10 years' time we could refer to this episode, future us could refer to this episode and see what we got right, if anything, and see what we got horribly wrong. And hopefully in 10 years' time, we're not doing that podcast in spacesuits.
On our way to Mars.
On our way to Mars. And, like hopefully in the future, normal spoken English, like what we're doing here, isn't subtitled because the English language has deviated in crazy wild ways. So yes, I want to speculate about what the future of GI Joe could be, what it's going to look like in 10 years' time, and maybe aside from having predictions, maybe throw out a few hopes for what we think it could look like, because I think it's kind of important. We're in a very strange place right now. There's news articles like Hasbro is going to stop toy production, and the decline of the size of toy aisles is getting smaller in stores. And here in South Africa, we're definitely seeing toy stores sort of disappear. So I wanted to just also have a hopeful episode as well with that. So that's what it's about. And my door keeps okay.
I thought someone was about to make a surprise appearance. I thought someone was going to come through that door. Well, Paul, that's how you sold this to me, because I do like the idea of a time capsule. I mean, my first prediction, may I just throw out, G.I. Joburg will still in some way, shape, or form be in existence. As long as one of us draws breath, I hope that this thing will still continue, even if it's just for our sakes. I mean, and also like for the diehards out there. I'm talking to you guys. You're awesome. With us from day one or thereabouts, and continue to keep us on your podcast rotation. If we're still here, presumably you're still here too. Let's keep on trucking. So 2035, G.I. Joburg's still alive.
Hey. So so I think the format for this should be what do we currently have? Just to start us off, I don't want it to be like too heavy-handed with this right now, or to be too structured. But let's start off with the structure. Let's let the structure be what do we currently have, and what do we think that might look like in 10 years' time. And you can start with anything, guys. You can start with a toy or a movie, whatever have you. So who wants to go? Who wants to go first, Rob?
Oh my goodness! I guess I want to go first. So obviously, right now we have a resurgence of O-rings thanks to Super 7. Obviously, Hasbro does the occasional O-ring figure when they kind of release a new Transformers GI Joe mashup. That's kind of like a reissue of kind of like an older figure. So I'm hoping like O-rings, going from there. I hope O-rings are thriving more so in the future than they are right now. Like I think it's a a renaissance for that kind of like toy format. Like I'm hoping that Super 7 kind of continues, to take off and produce line after line of O-ring figures. And we just get hopefully new vehicles at some point too. I think that'd be a really great thing to see new vehicles sized for O-rings, because obviously Hasbro themselves are doing a lot of vehicles for the classified line, but those are all kind of like HasLabs. Those are special edition things. They cost like hundreds of dollars. But yeah, I'd love like newly designed vehicles, especially with Super 7 doing it being so influenced by the cartoons. I mean, there's so many cartoon vehicles that don't exist as actual vehicles already, that that are their own thing inside the cartoon that they could definitely make or make.
Zooming out from that though, Rob, like this isn't just a 5-year product cycle or a 2-year product cycle. This is 10 years. Will Super 7 still be making Reaction O plus figures?
I'd like to think so, for sure. Like I'm very hopeful. I mean, that like people seem to be generally quite positive for what's come out so far. And they are.
Rob makes a prediction in 10 years' time. Super 7 will still be making O-ring GI Joe figures, and vehicles, by the sounds of things.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
That's where it should. That's where it needs to go.
Gents, I'm gonna like start this topic off from my side with the big one. Will classified series still exist in 10 years? Will it be produced, or will it have capped off? Because already, like, unless they keep remaking core characters, we've got a modern and a vintage Scarlet. We've got a modern and a vintage Duke. We've got, they're plumbing the depths of characters like Kamakura, Slice and Dice, Nunchuck, Raptor. Like, there are a few like head scratches. Why is there no Lifeline yet? Why is there no Airtight? But those will eventually come up.
No, that will happen. They will happen.
And this has all happened very rapidly. Has the classified series burned bright and will burn very quickly? Or is there enough gas for this thing to go the distance and like take on new life? Like 10 years is it can be a fairly long time, especially when you consider how far it's come in just the first 5.
So, okay, so this kind of reigns into one of my predictions now as well. So, Rob, you speculate that we're still going to have Super 7 in the future. In 10 years from now, Super 7 will still be making reaction O-ring style GI Joes. Steve, you positing the question, will we still have classified in the future? And I think this is what I think is going to happen. I think a lot of our toys, our vintage toys, are going to they are disintegrating. They are falling apart. Okay. And so the vintage stuff is definitely going to skyrocket in value. I think that's definitely going to happen, especially stuff that's mint in card or stuff that's very well preserved. So probably not our collections. And I suspect our collections might even last longer than that. But I feel like maybe 20 to 30% of the world's GI Joe collection is going to start deteriorating due to just plastic weakening, bonds, the temperatures changing, and all that good stuff. And so I think there's going to be a need and a resurgence of the O-ring GI Joe line, the vintage, to be reproduced, much like how Hasbro has been doing it, sort of, but this time with a full-on emphasis of like kind of celebrating an era of toys. And the precedent that I have for this is Star Wars, because we had the vintage stuff in Star Wars, and it took them almost 30 years before making the sort of Star Wars Black Series and vintage and retro collections the way that they did, almost as if to refresh and remind people that those toys existed, but obviously not done in their classic style. That it created that precedent was created by them, and then Super 7 created the reaction figures, whatever's. But I think we're going to have this like huge retro revival. That's one thing I think is going to happen. And I also think that toys are going to become the landscape of toys is going to get very different. I think 3D printing within the next 10 years is going to become a lot more consumer friendly. Whereas I have a suspect that all three of us at some point might own a 3D printer in the future, or at least one of us will. And we're doing our purchases digitally. So we're buying a digital figure, we're printing it out on a 3D printer, which through some magic of future technology is going to print out the resin at the right color. And I've already seen 3D printers now that can do like some kind of like color printing already. So I imagine some kind of tempo or laser printing technology might exist in a 3D printer, and that's how we're going to get our toys, which is going to mean that companies that do factory-made figures, those are going to become very deluxe, and that's where the classified stuff comes in. I think classifieds are going to be things that we're going to be able to download and sort of do ourselves. And then the boutiques, the third-party guys, they're going to try and offer something that's going to remind us of the 2000s and the early 2000s and the early 2020s. We're going to get that kind of feeling of toy, like toys that we regard as everyday, like classified. Now, how we get them are going to be regarded as like boutique kind of figures, and they're going to be. I think they're going to like go for about $80, probably around there. Something I think is going to happen
10 years time.
In 10 years time, I see that happening in 10 years time, because 3D printing.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, just $80 might seem a little low if you consider that a figure's $40 in 2025.
No.
True. Okay, mind you, I mean, the last classified figure I saw was $25.
Okay.
I think if that's yeah. So that's kind of where that pricing model comes from. Also, I don't think, and because of this conversation, we do have to look at world events just briefly. There's a lot of things happening in the political space. Trading routes are changing. There are all kinds of sanctions and stuff popping up. So I think shipping is going to become a huge issue for all toy companies around the world. It doesn't matter how big they are. And I think the companies that are based in Asia, they're going to sort of have quite a strong market penetration, more so than they used to before. But to access the American market, they're going to need to start looking at selling people digital products, because that doesn't need to be shipped. So that's kind of my thinking. I also think we're going to see a huge rise. Like right now, we've got what I like to refer to, and this is done with respect, all third-party toy companies right now, and I'm talking about like Valiverse, I'm talking about the wonderful people who made the Delta figures. I'm talking about the RoboSkull guys, Skeletron. Those guys right now, and I say this with respect, they are let's call them the hobbyist toy companies. I'm not saying that because they're anything less than a full-on toy company, but they're not like Hasbro level yet in terms of the size of their businesses, but they've got more passion than those businesses. And I think just like the indie game scene, we're going to see a lot more, let's call them, the hobby toy industry is going to grow, and that is going to become the toy industry, the toy market.
Yeah.
So Super 7 might even restructure itself going forward, is how I feel. So I think we're going to get we're going to be very spoiled for choice in terms of quality and how figures are made. And then
will classified series still exist, Paul? Was the question.
Yes, they will, because modern era GI Joe has proven that Hasbro will double dip, and I'm sure we'll start getting classified versions of 90s GI Joe figures. So we'll start getting the 90s version of Duke in classified form. We'll start getting maybe, I mean, if that line's still getting steam, we might even get Battle Core Mindbender in the classified line. I think there's still a lot of gold.
Paul, the way I recall, the modern era construction only had 8 years of life. Started in 2007. By 2015, the only people making modern construction GI Joe was the Collectors Club.
That's correct. And then Joy Toy and Acid Rain, they are third parties that popped up and did their thing. And now Bandai, believe it or not, they're jumping on that bandwagon as well. They're also making those kind of figures. But actually, that's what I'm...
Model kits?
No, they're actually doing figures. They've done figures of Amuro, Shah, Sailor Mars, and Rumble Roll as their GI Joe size, their modern era size figures. But okay, so you take that 8-year period that modern era GI Joe came out, right? And you look at how many times they re-released and rebranded themselves in that period of time. So we had 25th anniversary, which is what we were introduced to. That had quite a strong life. Also, like Classified, it blitzed out. They got a lot of guys in the roster done, did box sets, deluxe packs, the whole shebang. Then pivoted. As soon as the movie came out, we got Rise of Cobra.
Rise of Cobra
figures. Yeah, we got the Rise of Cobra. That was the whole thing. And Rise of Cobra, they ran with it. They gave us stuff in that roster that wasn't in the film, but that did appear in the game in some form or another. We got all of that. Then we got another rebrand, which was like Pursuit of Cobra, which was kind of, it feels like a spin-off from Rise of Cobra. Then we got the movie version, the movie figures with Ninja Rock.
Retaliation.
And then we got Retaliation, thank you. And then we got Renegades. Oh, and somewhere in between there was GI Joe Resolute as well. So in that short amount of time, the figure line was almost refreshed, like, what is it, like 6 times? It's crazy. And so I think we're still in the first circle of Classified now. I think we're going to get a second circle of Classified. And it might not be as bold as the first circle was.
I'd argue that we've moved past that first circle.
Oh, yeah?
That first circle that wanted to make Classified designs their own thing.
Oh.
We've moved past that to a time where the Classified series primarily focuses on replaying the classics and presenting them.
And I mean, they're doing them a lot more. I mean, I was just trying to look at a list just now. I mean, like, they started out with less than 10 in the first year. And I think last year they produced like almost 40 figures. If I'm if I'm counting up the list,
they're spooling up.
They're kind of producing more and more and more because they see the popularity of that these things have. But I mean, I think, as Paul says, they can over time kind of rejigger things to kind of reinvigorate the line as they go along. So I think there was the kind of initial phase. Now we're into the kind of reproduction phase at this point. But hopefully they do get to there will be another phase after this. And
I wonder,
and they are trying more with making more vehicles for the line, whether it's HasLab things or it is vehicles within the line as well. So they are making it more expanded, as in like the options and things that you can get as classified size things.
I also think
10 years though, I don't know.
There's something to be said about Hasbro wanting to pull a lot of its assets into the digital market. People immediately take that as gaming. They want to get into the interactive market, but digital also means downloadable 3D printable things. There's a lot of product that Hasbro can make 3D printable right now, but they won't use that model right now because it's not a convenient enough thing. 3D printers are not in everybody's homes, and they're not consumer accessible. They're not properly.
Yeah, they're not trendy enough to make it easy for anyone to use. Because I mean, we're at that point now where people will pay money for entirely digital things. Like businesses and the market has gotten people used to just paying for essentially nothing. Not a thing that is not physical in any way whatsoever. We place value upon digital items, skins, or even just streaming services. We pay for the access to the movies and TV shows that we watch. We pay for licenses to play the games that we used to own.
I pay for permission.
So we're at that point where like paying for digital stuff is a lot. People's minds they're more accepting of placing value upon digital things. But I think if 3D printing can catch up to the mindset of being able to buy digital stuff and pay for it and own it, as it were, then that can make a big difference. And also they would cut costs hugely for a business like Hasbro, where they don't have to have factories to produce these figures. They don't have to do anything physically anymore. Yes, they'll probably produce, they'll 3D print their own prototypes and stuff to make sure that the kit works. But yeah, I feel like that feels like a realm that they could definitely move into, where they are like just producing digital models, and you'd buy the latest, Snake Eyes 2028. Like, hey, here's the latest Snake Eyes with new color patterns and
already it's astounding to me how 3D printers have stepped into that space. Like making mod parts for figures and vehicles is one thing, but making the vehicles themselves, that's something altogether different. Like, there was a guy who did a classified scale USS flag.
Wow.
Okay?
Yes.
And he made it in the same style as the classic 1985's flag. So, it was very toyetic. He didn't try to endeavor to like improve upon those designs too much. I mean, there were some changes, and it's astounding. Similarly, someone has taken the Super 7 sort of walkthroughs of their mothership, the Cobra mothership, and has bashed that out in 3D render and has printed it available for purchase.
That's crazy.
This was a failed campaign, but because you had that 3D model in existence, the guy was able to map that out and print it painstakingly.
I mean, just having that isometric shot, you could get pretty close to that if you did front, backs, and sides for it. You could build it in 3D.
Oh, it's incredible. He did the weapons lockers, everything. It's all modeled.
That's beautiful. I love hearing stuff like that.
Form.
Because I hope things like, but you see, it's things like that I feel are serving as lessons to these businesses, and they're starting to see the potential. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we in as soon as 2026 or 2027 start seeing businesses like, for example, Super 7 actually being one of the first sort of companies, first parties, should we say, to actually make 3D printable 3D printable purchasables from their stores. I would not be surprised, especially with the political climate being what it is. Yes, I did say that we might have classified in the future. I do still lean to the fact that we're going to see classified maybe more as a 3D printable thing. Because I think shipping and manufacturing outside of America is going to become very difficult for America, depending on how things go right now. And I know this might seem like a very doomsayer thing to say, but it's just how I think the market's going to react. When COVID happened, we saw shipping rates increase exponentially. We saw all kinds of stupid shit happen in the market purely because of capitalism and
war in Europe.
Yes,
that'll do it.
No, but that was the nail in the coffin. But but of the two things, COVID is posited as being the bigger offender of that because of the increased online purchasing that started clogging up shipping lanes with deliveries and all that stuff. So that is what I think these companies are going to have to start doing. And also in true capitalist fashion, I think Hasbro is going to create a bespoke 3D printing product, or will license something, but they'll definitely be selling the special filament. So it'll be a case of you can print it with any 3D printer, but if you use the Hasbro product, the Hasbro plastic, for example, it will be more efficient. These products tested with the Hasbro product, with the Hasbro plastic.
Yeah, they had to find a way of making it exclusive to them, or DRM it, like with music.
Totally.
It used to be when you did music downloads, or I suppose maybe they still do it.
And I actually, and this might be crazy, and I think we have kind of spoken about this when they first talked about the Hasbroverse. I got a good feeling that Hasbroverse, that for the next 5 years, we're going to have Hasbroverse. We're going to actually have the GI Joe. There's going to be a new movie on GI Joe. We know that that's coming, but I think what we had with the Transformers, when the first Transformers film by Paramount came out, and how we saw all those Transformers toys in stores, and what it did for that brand, I think we're finally going to see that happen for GI Joe, possibly from about 2026 onwards. I know it sounds completely crazy, but it's if you look at the way things like sort of cycle at the moment, superheroes are like, people are done with superheroes. People are done with they're done with Transformers a little bit at the moment, but throw in Transformers and mix Call of Duty with it and call it Transformers GI Joe, and I think you're going to start seeing people like find their way towards that. And I think we're not going to see that necessarily as a cinematic thing. I think we're going to see those as streaming events, unfortunately, as much as I hate to say that, because I think cinema is very important for film. And it's quite sad. Like, I watched the top 10 the other day yesterday, in fact, a top 10 of films that completely bombed, but are actually great films. And one of the reasons they speculate for it not doing well is because they didn't get any influencers involved in marketing the film, which is quite tragic. Yeah. So
no hot
as
ones.
a brand,
damn,
no hot ones. But yeah, guys, like, in your mind, like, do you think GI Joe? Like, I mean, I've said what I've said, but that doesn't mean it's true. What do you guys feel about the brand of GI Joe? Do you think we're going to see that in the future? Do you think the comic that we're currently reading is going to actually become a mainstay? What do you guys think?
Ooh, are we flipping to the print media? Rob, I think you should lead the charge on this one.
Crazy. So obviously we all know Skybound is currently printing their own GI Joe comics set within the what's it called again?
Void Rivals universe.
The Energon Void Rivals universe. And I mean, he's been very good at adapting. Kirkman has been very good at adapting his own properties along the way. Obviously, we have Walking Dead that became a TV series. Invincible has become an animated show, a very successful animated show.
Both doing well, yeah.
Yeah, so I think when he acquires a license, he kind of looks at it in a multimedia, like setting, where he wants to tell those stories, not just in comic books, but he wants to then pitch them beyond that into other spaces. So I feel like at some point we will definitely get, I don't know if it'll be a live action movie, but there will probably be some sort of maybe an animated adaptation of the Energon universe, where we get to see all these characters in motion. I don't think it'll be in live action, because I think at this point, like, especially when you look at the toys aren't based off stories so much anymore. Like, I think what drove the sales of the toys and what a lot of people's interest in the toys was the interconnectivity, between, like, you had stories in the comic books that influence how you might play with them, you had the cartoon that helped influence how you play with the toys. But at this point, Classified is off doing its own thing. O-Rings by Super 7 is influenced by the cartoons, so I suppose there's a connection there, but they're also kind of doing their own thing. And then then the stories are basically their own universe now, the Skybound stuff. So I think over time they'll probably continue to get exceptionally successful. It's just, especially because I think we can all kind of admit that Transformers is more popular than GI Joe. So, but by linking them together, it kind of like drags
a good vehicle for GI Joe.
Yeah, it drags GI Joe into that spotlight, and it kind of helps to shine a spotlight on it and make it hopefully a little bit more relevant to people than just Transformers fans. The Transformers people, they look at GI Joe more favorably, I think, as they get more interested in these characters. And yeah, I mean, I feel like Kirkman was going to go for the long haul on this thing. With the comic series, I think we can definitely get up into the hundreds of issues on these stories and see those spin out into hopefully at least animation.
So in 10 years' time, we're talking, Void Rivals in its sort of 160th issue.
Yeah, something like that for sure.
Right.
100%. Yeah, I think he's in it for the long haul. He acquired those licenses for a reason, and it's not just to produce 4 comic books and make a little bit of money off that. I think he has a long-term plan of where he wants
animated
to see
show as early as 2030, earlier
2027. I would imagine.
Wow, Paul's really enthused. I'd probably say 2030. I mean, it took him quite a while, to get his original stories onto screen, but he is obviously moving much quicker now.
Hell yeah.
Walking Dead
Proven
started
track record.
early
Bankable.
2000s. Yeah.
Hmm.
Walking Dead was early 2000s. Invincible was a little bit after, also early 2000s, and those only really started getting shows now. I mean, okay, not Walking Dead, but Invincible, 2 years ago was when the first season came out?
So are we in agreement that G.I. Joe's best shot at animated media is riding the coattails of the Energon universe? Or do you think there can be a dedicated G.I. Joe cartoon series without the assistance of Transformers, etc.?
No, I don't think.
No.
Okay.
No, at this point, I think it's very difficult to do that, because also G.I. Joe came out, it was the 80s. America was exceptionally patriotic. Soldiers, I mean, they will always be heroes, but they were more heroic back then, I think. And maybe, I don't know, depending on the Cold War, yeah, there was actual conflict. You could actually see the conflict out there. There was a reason for them to exist and why people would want, to make heroes of soldiers.
But G.I. Joe was able to move with the times in a sort of a post 9/11 world. Instead of war on terrorists, G.I. Joe focused inwards with renegades and became sort of an A-team story under the thumb of Big Pharma. Cobra was a bad corporate entity.
Yeah, but how long did that cartoon last?
Yeah, it was tragically
season and a half.
No, one season, and
season.
I believe it wasn't helped by being on an obscure channel, Hub,
Hulu.
I think.
Yeah, Hub, yeah.
So it didn't have a lot going for it, but it was compelling-ish. I mean, it wasn't.
It was an interesting new take. It would have been cool to see where it would go. It was in the
I don't know if it
beginning stages.
Children. I mean,
that's what I
wasn't given a fighting chance.
Yeah.
My take on that is that the big corporation that hurt GI Joe is Hasbro, because there's actually nothing wrong with there's nothing
Cobra
wrong
Industries.
With Cobra
Industries.
We make everything and dildos. Anyway, Renegades is a good show. Whether you like it or not, it's a well-made show. And as you said, it's intriguing.
Except for the backgrounds, Paul.
Yeah, the backgrounds could have been better, but that can also be a sign of the show had to be turned around quickly, and in order for the studio to keep the green light and to hopefully win a contract for a second season. It's quite sad because Renegade's numbers might have actually done well enough, within the context of how it was presented, but Hasbro was just like no, and they could have just cancelled it like that. Resolute. Beautiful. How many guys? I'm sure as I'm saying Resolute now, and I'm going, how many of you guys would have loved to have seen more Resolute? And I'm pretty sure everybody's screaming at their podcasting device or YouTube or whatever's going, yes. And I think that did well. It did well. It did well in that GI Joe fans know about it. They could have done more of that, but Hasbro was like, no. So I think in order for G.I. Joe to actually succeed going forward, Hasbro needs to actually be able to step aside or have somebody that's producing something for them that is good at keeping them at bay. And I'm referring to, the Kevin Feige's of this world, for example, who are very good at, keeping Disney at bay when it comes to making their stuff, which is why Kevin Feige Productions, Star Wars Productions, seem to stand out differently from other Star Wars TV series. Why Michael
confusing Feige's Mr. Marvel.
Feige did stuff for Star Wars as well. Didn't he? Yes, he did. Isn't the Mandalorian Kevin Feige's?
It's I'm blanking on his
What's
name
his
now.
name?
From Clone Wars.
Fat director dude, yeah.
With the cowboy hat.
Okay. My bad. I'm sorry, Mr. Feige, for getting you confused.
But I believe he wants
the compliment
to be
anyway, because Kevin Feige is great.
Yeah, I believe he wants to be involved with some sort of Star Wars project, but that hasn't happened yet. So you're right. So, maybe by 2035 he'll have been involved with the Star Wars project.
But having strong creative, strong producers and strong creators, being able to sort of sort of placate the
Dave
the
Filoni.
big corpos. Dave Filoni,
Yes.
thank
Oh,
you.
Dave.
Filoni.
Yeah.
There we go. I should have remembered that shit.
Filoni.
Anyway, the thing is GI Joe GI Joe needs Transformers to do well, because GI Joe has unfortunately proven that it can't do well by itself because Hasbro keeps killing it.
Won't let it do its own thing, and it seems like
yes, it
they
won't let
just
it
don't
grow.
believe in the brand anymore, which is unfortunate.
Exactly.
So yes, unfortunately, it has to kind of like integrate with Transformers to kind of hit that wider market.
To make it relevant, also having soldiers shoot giant robots, a lot more PG than having
you
them
can
shoot
sell that to a much
guys in
wider
blue shit.
market.
Yes.
Or aliens.
So I think that's
you
definitely...
see, the thing is, by introducing aliens as well, they're less human to a certain degree. So you can do that. This almost the same thing. But as we are kind of talking about stories, or people that create stories for GI Joe, I imagine a very big question would be, where do we see Ra in 10 years? Do we think by then Larry will be done writing GI Joe? Will he? Will they find another writer to continue it? Do we think Ra, sorry to say it like this, dies with Larry Hama?
I think Ra... Actually, I want Steven's opinion on this. Steven, what do you think is the future of Ra, of GI Joe Ra, after like Larry Hama, for example?
I think it should go away. Die with him. I mean, I use die in the figurative sense because I think Larry might choose to step away and just enjoy some retirement. Though at the same time, he's on many occasions said, like, I am a freelancer, the kind of artist who will die at his drawing desk, basically, because like I got no safety net. I got to keep working for my bread. So maybe he'll keep going as long as he absolutely can. Whether that realistically is 10 years, well, people are living longer and longer these days. I think I don't want to speculate on that because I think it should just be a huge signal to everyone who has enjoyed his work in the past to go out and support his work in the present, because we are so fortunate that it exists. Like, he's still doing it. The man who gave us GI Joe, A Real American Hero, way back in '82, is still at the helm of that book. Incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But
also,
that said, I don't think I don't think we'll likely see Ra continue beyond Larry's tenure. Those shoes are also impossibly big to fill.
They are. And I also just want to like maybe just do a shout out to 3D Joe's, that with the huge like compendium, the big GI Joe graphic novel anthology compendium thing that's happening. There are proceeds of that, and there is money that is being sent to Larry Hama. When I'm saying in a very basic terms, but Larry Hama is going to benefit from the sale of those things, and it's awesome to see that, because that in essence is somebody like Carson from 3D Joe's and the team trying to also like pay it forward and kind of give Larry Hama a space to be able to retire. Because I think Ara, I agree with you, Steve. I think Ara should die, and it should be put to rest once Larry Hama can't write it anymore. It should be done. It's a part of our history. That's awesome. The same way that I feel like they shouldn't write more Dune books, and it's the same way they shouldn't write more Lord of the Rings. And this, we had these great authors do these great pieces of fiction, and we shouldn't actually continue them. And I say that, and I know it sounds like a huge hypocrite because I am excited about the new Jurassic Park film. But the best Jurassic Park story was written already in the first book. Everything else is like an homage.
So I think it is very smart of Kirkman to kind of like, Larry Hama has his continuity, but he also has, Kirkman himself has an entire playground that he plays in with the same characters, adapting them into his own version. Because a lot of other companies would kind of like either do their own thing and not have a Rock kind of going at the same time, but now you kind of like you give hopefully as many fans as possible the chance to read the type of GI Joe that they want to read, and hopefully cross over maybe from the Ra to kind of check out what Kirkman's doing. So yeah, I think I'm agreeing with you guys. A Ra is Larry Hama. Larry Hama is a Ra, and when he's done with it, it's finished. But thankfully that's not the end of GI Joe stories in general.
I got a question for you guys.
Or
do you think
for you? Maybe.
Well, I want to see what you guys think of this. I've also got my speculation, but I'm more interested in what you guys have to say because I know what I want to say, but the listeners don't. Do you still think that we will have toys in 10 years' time? Do you think we'll still have toys how we have toys today? Do you think children will still be playing with toys in 10 years' time? Is the actual question I'm asking.
My children specifically, yes. I absolutely think they will have toys. They'll have all of my toys, even if they didn't have their own. But I will ensure, once again, as long as I draw breath, that my children have an imaginative life and they live it through plastic playthings. They can choose to indulge that, because I will always be a resource for them. Or they can choose to find their own pastimes, be it video games or sport, heaven help us. But the option will always be presented to them. I'll always be ready to play, ready to kind of go into the garden with an action figure or a vehicle or a transformer or that's
not a soccer ball. Jesus.
Yeah, well,
no.
I won't say no. I won't.
No, I know you won't because you're a cool dad.
Son, put down the ball.
Gosh darn it! You want to make money playing sports? How dare you?
I want to take this opportunity for 2 seconds and just say one of the reasons that I think my dad is one of the best dads in the world is that when I was a kid,
on record,
when I was a kid, I was into soccer or football, as the King's people know it as. I was enamored with soccer for a little while, for a very short period of my life, fueled primarily by these trading cards that you could get at the corner store. And so I was kicking a ball around. And my dad, who is a stern rugby and cricket man only, my dad only knows 4 balls in his life. A cricket ball, a tennis ball, a rugby ball,
his 2 balls.
And his 2 balls. Any other ball sport doesn't exist. So my dad used to actually kick a soccer ball around with me. And I got to say, Steve, I can say this for 35 years later after the event. And I'm like, yeah, play ball with your kids, guys. They remember this shit. It's important. So yeah, carry on, Steve. So play soccer with your kid. That's what I'm saying.
Well, no, that answers like in the specific case of my kids, but in general, the lifespan of kids' toy lives is shortening. The allure of the tablet cannot be denied, and a tablet will even be old school in 10 years' time. There'll be perhaps VR, but perhaps it'll just be like a pair of specs.
Or tangible holograms.
Can I have some VR time? Put them on your eyes and off you go into a fully immersive world, both visually and auditory. No need to swipe. Your hands are your hands, your feet are your feet. You just look like an absolute knob to anyone not plugged in.
With the blood shield down.
But yes, look, you can't deny that, it's unheard of. Rob and I were playing with plastic action figures into our 20s. That's an outlier. We are freaks. But it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility to still be playing with action figures into our teens and then put them down, as more alluring things cross our noses. But nowadays, a child puts down the toys, I don't know, before they even tweens. Like 8 or 9. It's done.
Yeah. So
our toys will be far more childish. They'll be trains and construction vehicles.
Yeah,
The
either
complexity
more
of an
childish.
O-ring action figure there won't be a market in the kids sphere for
Yeah,
something
they'll
this
either be way
complex.
more childish or more electronic, where the toy essentially plays itself.
Yuck.
You know, it auto transforms. It does. It interacts with you. Yeah, so I think toys would be very different in the future. I mean, we're really seeing it now that a lot of the good toys, the well-designed toys, the things that look good, that pose nicely, are essentially aimed at the collector's market. So, I mean, toys in general, I think, are more collectibles than ever in the history of toy production. So I
I
imagine
will
by
say that's something I predicted.
2035. Yes, yeah, I think you have mentioned this before. But I think you're probably in the next 10 years it'll shift more towards that, where things really will be more collectible and there will be less toys in the aisles. I think that's a very easy trajectory to kind of see things going in. Is kids playing with less toys and having less time with toys.
I wish I
For
was more
sure.
connected to the 12-inch GI Joe collector world.
Oh
I'll tell you
gosh.
why. Paul, you said that the value of classic ARA O-ring GI Joes will continue to skyrocket because of fragility, scarcity of good condition toys. Now, for someone like me who isn't interested in dead mint specimens, would the opposite not happen? As collectors cash in, sell off, die out, and their stuff goes into estate sales, wouldn't the market become once again flooded with inexpensive army builders, troops, figures? Or will the value continue to rise? Because they made a shit ton of those figures in the 80s and 90s. There's a lot of it still out there. I have 2 Zartans. Neither of them have lost their O-ring just yet. That's a 40-year-old figure. Okay. So yes, absolutely. Some are being subjected to harmful UV temperature variations, but a lot of it is residing in people's private homes, private collections, in climate-controlled areas, and they're fairly well preserved.
Not
The
like mine,
plastic
which are
doesn't have
piled next to me on the desk.
the plastic doesn't have the same kind of shelf life as us fleshy creatures. Like this stuff, provided it's not a garbage heap, will outlive us. The plastic isn't going to turn into a
a lot of
puddle.
other collectibles, like comics, for instance, they can last a lot longer, a lot easier, and in generally better condition as well.
So the reason I wanted to quiz the 12-inch crowd, and maybe someone in the comments can help us out there, has the value of that stuff stabilized? Or is it still insane?
Yeah, because I mean,
of
those
the
are
effect
even
of...
older than a raw. I mean, that's what, 60s?
Yeah.
When did those
I
start
believe
coming
there
out?
is a complexity to them that sort of have internal strings and stuff like that, and elastics. So,
Yeah, and then the fabric of the clothes as well. I mean,
true.
that deteriorates over time quite easily.
Jeez, okay. Maybe bad example. The complexity
But
of that
still,
stuff
it
is...
would be interesting to know, because they are at this point, people who collect those are 20 years ahead of us.
Yep.
Yeah,
they are, and they are in a weird sense kind of a portal into the a look into the future there. Also, I think another question to ask that crowd is, are they still in demand in the collecting circles? Because something's only valuable once it has a demand, once there's a demand for it. We saw this before toy collecting became a thing. We saw this on eBay. We saw GI Joes for $2, and like complete GI Joes for $4. Now that's the good old days.
When was that?
Dude, in the very beginning, I picked up a modern era Snake Eyes in packaging on an eBay purchase for like $3. It was mad, and I've picked up some of my vintage O-ring
talking
stuff.
About vintage,
for like
yeah, exactly.
And I picked up vintage stuff for about $4 or $5. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But I'm just saying, like, I mean, I have picked up for that price. I mean,
I got onto eBay,
actually, it's your advice.
When I got onto eBay in the the late 90s, a complete vintage figure, sort of mass produced, but still in demand, say a Beachhead, or a Lady J, the going rate was about $15.
Okay.
Mm.
Hey, my Night
That was the
Raven was
magic number.
$50.
50.
My,
Yeah, look,
Whoa.
they're deals. There are always going to be deals, but like if you average it
that is
out,
vintage toys. Yeah.
you wouldn't expect to pay too much more than $15 for a non-rare figure.
So, but then, and it's the same thing with the video game market, by the way. Like the retro video game market in the 90s and early 2000s was like per se, it was nothing. Nobody cared. I mean, you could pick up PS1 games, even like popular and stuff that's considered rare now. You could pick up those things for between $15, $20 at most. Now, Silent Hill, for example, I think is sitting at $200 or $300. Silent Hill 1 on PS1. Castlevania Symphony of the Night is about, I think it's also like a $300 game or $400 game now. But it's just that these products, I mean, okay, going back as far as NES, Steve, you and I spoke about getting a retro, not retro, but like a NES version of the GI Joe games. We've had this conversation before, long ago, around the time we started the podcast, and at that time, I could pick up the NES GI Joe game for a whole $8. And that was just a cartridge, but it was $8. I remember because I had it in my eBay watch list for forever, and I kept thinking, oh yeah, I'll ship it eventually. I'll ship it eventually. And now you can't find them for. I haven't found any for less than $70 or $80. That's been my experience. But I also haven't really dug too much because I'm trying not to go down that rabbit hole.
I think it's fair to say then the trend will always be up. We're not going to suddenly see a moment where O-ring GI Joe tanks in value and it's a free for all, a buyer's market once again.
So, to answer my question, or my answer to the question I posed earlier about will kids still be playing with toys in 10 years, I've got two answers for that, and I know that doesn't really mean it's a prediction, but I've got two visions of how this could go. Visions. The one is quite dystopian, where kids no longer play with toys at all. In fact, they don't adopt or gravitate towards toys at all, and instead start gravitating towards more practical things like tools. It sounds crazy, okay, but hear me out. That they gravitate towards tools and things like that. Now, that scenario that happens when things get really bad over the next 10 years in the world, okay, where kids won't be bought, they won't experience toys because it'll all be about like surviving and whatever. You see this kind of phenomenon in countries that have had heavy communist leadership and had lots of war-torn buildings and things like that, where kids completely just skipped over owning toys and either picked up tools or picked up guns. Okay, that I said it was dystopian. Okay, but that is like a prediction. There's also stats that actually are showing that kids are putting tablets down. Tablets and digital things are not appealing to children. There's a generation of children that's like kind of popping up around now. They like, actually, Steve, I believe your kids fall into that band where a lot of them are rejecting tablets. They're seeing less screen time from those kids, less voluntary screen time. Like they're only using it if they need to be pacified, but otherwise, if they can choose to do something else, they're choosing to do other things. There is a resistance to tablet
I hope
use.
you're right, mate. I'm quite laissez-faire about screen time, so I'm hoping the kids can self-limit.
The younger parents, the parents that are much younger than us, they are very anti-screen as well. You're getting there's also a band of anti-technology adults coming into the world as well that are rejecting technology quite a bit, as especially things like screens, and are pushing towards more sort of naturalistic child rearing methods and whatever. That's also kind of a thing that's going on at the moment.
Woo-woo.
And let's not like overlook one very important thing that we're actually dealing with, and it is a very important thing, and people are talking about it, but we haven't seen it's kind of like a hole in the ozone layer. Okay, microplastics. I think we're going to get to a place, and we're already starting to get there. I think we're going to start seeing things like, because of the abundance of microplastics, the pricing on creating plastic is going to skyrocket, and other materials will need to be used to create plastic. And I think toys are going to be one of the casualties of that, which is why I initially said I think we're going to start going into 3D printed toys, which are going to use composites and things that are not necessarily plastic. Even though I called it Hasbro's 3D printing plastic, I think we're going to start seeing other composites move away from plastic composites and move away
so we
from
really
plastic.
are going to see disposable toys that will degrade after 10 years. So that's why these old boys, hold on to them, man, because as I said before, they will outlive us all.
Worth tons of money, because they'll be the only plastic that's outside of our bodies by that point.
Only toys still standing. Oi.
Oi.
Guys, I'd like to, because we could debate this back and forth forever, but I think to put a cap on this, I'd like to bring the question back home to a very personal setting. Where do you see your collection in 10 years? Will it have expanded? Will it have been capped off? What state do you see your GI Joe journey in 2035? Don't all speak at once.
Okay, I'm going to speak. Sorry, I was trying to give somebody else the mic because I'd spoken so much earlier. I see all of my vintage stuff in my cool glass case, like that my dad and I made together. I see that being in my house with another little glass case with it that has got the Super 7 line, as far as and that has covered a lot of the great characters. And I actually do see a bit of a toy room in that version of my house, in that future house. I go I'm hopefully kicked ass with something, won the lottery, did something right, and I got a big house to have my collection there and in its entirety. I see some of it being sellotaped together though.
Yeah.
And maybe I might by that point finally get Sideshow Destro to cap off my Sideshow Toys collection.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
And you, Robbie, what are you hopeful for when it comes to collection?
Yeah, I think in the next 10 years, I'd hope to own a couple of more GI Joes. I mean, there's definitely I think, because I've always had access to Stevens ones, I never felt the need to own a lot of GI Joes. But now having my collection separate from him, I do feel the lack, I think, of a lot of characters, where I'm like, I used to be able to just, whenever I visited Steven, I could grab anyone I wanted, really. And now that I'm kind of sitting alone with my collection, it's like, I don't have that, dude. So I imagine I'd hope that my collection will be bigger than it is now. I wouldn't imagine significantly bigger. I'm very slow to spend money, or at least the ability to spend money is very low. Yeah, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully by then I'll have 2 backpacks filled with Joes instead of 1. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Maybe in 10 years' time for me, maybe I'll have somebody I can share my collection with. I don't know. We never know what the future holds when it comes to that kind of thing. But that would be cool.
Don't let them touch your shit, dude.
Don't.
Oh, they won't.
They have their own toys.
Sure.
No, they really won't. There will be like lasers and stuff, not just laser sensors that will release a subtle knockout gas if they do find themselves in that room, unauthorized, of course. I'm joking. I wouldn't do shit like that, but yes, I get where you're coming from, Steve.
Yeah, because when they pass out, that might fall onto the glass cases. So you have to find a different way of keep them out.
Is this something you want to tell the listeners?
No. The joke is that in 10 years' time, it might be so bad that letting your child play with plastic toys would be tantamount to letting them smoke.
Play with your 9 mil.
You wouldn't let a kid touch plastic, would you?
Good. Yeah.
Well, gents, I look around me and I see something that gives me enormous contentment. My collection, as far as I'm concerned, is more than complete. I have more toys than I ever dreamed of having. So anything I get beyond this point is just excess. I'm quite happy. I've said this before. I'm going to predict that in 2035, both Zartans will still have intact O-rings.
Okay. I want to see that.
They've lasted 4 decades. Let's go for number 5.
They're gonna keep going. It's probably something to do with the way that the plastics are made for those figures. You know, the color change.
Probably more airtight.
It keeps the O-ring more alive.
The rubber.
Maybe they use a more specialized O-ring because they knew that you couldn't change out the body, so they were like, we got to make this one tough.
Interesting.
So
Yeah,
I've done a Zandon, I've done a Zorana, but never a Zartan just yet.
Yeah, I've done both as well. To be fair, guys, one thing I'm seriously hoping for that will be, hopefully even before 10 years, I really do hope that I am involved in making some very cool toys of a GI Joe-ish nature. Are some of the things that I'd like to make. I really look forward to having the opportunity to work with guys like Delta 17 in the future, with 3D Joes. You know, I'd love to see, like, I feel like those guys are very much my vibe. I'd love to do that kind of stuff. Skeletron. I'd love to know that I worked on something that was produced, and I'd love to have that in my collection as well. That would be very special to me. That would mean that I am not just taking from the world and adding to my collection, but that I've added something to the world that has added it to their collection. You know, that's kind of an important thing for me. So
that's a great thing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and if 3D printing really takes off and the indie toy zone becomes a bit bigger, I mean, I can definitely see that happening. Yeah, I'd love to own a Paul design toy at some point.
Thank you, man. Speaking of which, I'd love to. I'm very excited about the Operation Recall stuff. I'm seeing more and more of it. Cosin has been posting tons of that stuff on Facebook lately, so it
looks good.
It's quite exciting.
Did you buy in? How many figures are you into?
I'm not into any of them as much as I want to buy them because it's very difficult for me to actually purchase them. So I'll figure it out when they're out. Out. Yeah.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think we come to the close of another episode of GI Joburg. Thank you very much for joining us.
Wait, tell them what we got, Steve. Tell them what we got. Slow down, my dude.
Guys, patrons. We love them.
We got patrons. We love them dearly. Thank you, patrons, for doing what you do. And my significant other, Celia, was in Cape Town very recently for some work stuff where she got to link up. She got to link up with these two criminals, and she came back.
Remember that?
This with her. She had a. I'm glad you do remember it. I got this very cool comic book from Rob. Thank you very much, my dude. You see, look, Robert Commander's going to touch you guys. Boop.
Oh, he's touching me.
Yeah. So
what comic book is that, Paulie?
It's the GI Joe. Let's call it the GI Joe Energon series. Issue number 1 variant with the painted cover of Cobra Commander.
It's gorgeous.
I can't remember the name of the artist right now. I keep wanting to say Lee Bamijo, but it's not Lee Bamijo.
It's like Lee Bamijo-esque, but it is. It's beautiful.
It's a beautiful cover. And Rob also snuck in a free comic book day, like Energon series, episode 1, which is, issue 1, which is still super hard backed because the way that he packaged it, he made it ironclad. It's like it's hardcore.
I tried my absolute best to.
It arrived here, no creases. Rob, you are a superstar. That's actually why I wanted to say thank you, my guy. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
I'm so happy.
I'm glad to hear that, man. And don't dwell up on me. And also in the same breath, very excited that BBTS finally has Ramar and the Fatal Fluffy up for pre-order.
No longer Target exclusives. BBTS
very excited, guys.
You better buy them right now.
Yeah.
People
and
in
my
Europe,
Cobra Commander, my Super 7 Cobra Ramander, my Super 7 Cobra Commander review will be out for the Patreons soonish.
Nice.
For everybody else, a little later after that. So cool.
Excellent. Looks like the future in 2035 looks bright, but it also looks bright for everyone here right now. Real
Boom.
bright. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
So it's getting bright.
It's looking bright.
Oh.
Bye.